Welcome to ResponseABLE Parenting, the podcast that shows you how to parent in alignment to your emotions, needs, and goals versus your programming, bad advice, and let's face it, outdated strategies that just don't work. You'll get in the trenches support on nervous system and emotional regulation, critical mindset shifts, stronger communication strategies, and more. In this podcast, you'll gain transformational tools that take you from reacting to every frustration to responding with clarity, regulation, and finally setting the example you desire for your kids. I'm Becky Jennings, your new parenting coach, and this is the ResponseABLE Parenting podcast. Let's get into it. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode. I am so excited. I have Devon Kuntzman on with us today. She is the original toddler parenting expert on Instagram. In 2018, she created the Transforming Toddlerhood with a mission to transform the myth that toddlerhood is terrible. She is an ICF certified coach with a degree in psychology. She has helped thousands of families each year through courses, workshops, and her annual Transforming Toddlerhood conference. Basically, we are going to get a masterclass in toddlerhood and a beautiful reframe on how it's really, truly not that terrible, and we can actually gain some skills and tools on how to make this better. So, Devon, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so what kind of kicked off this journey for you? Because I know everyone hears about the terrible twos and the three-nagers, and it's just going to be terrible, so buckle up. I mean, that's literally the advice that we were given. So how did you kind of what made you stop and go, it can't be this bad?
Yeah. So I spent a long time as a nanny for high profile families all over the world. So I had the pleasure of working with lots of children and lots of different cultures, family dynamics with different temperaments, personalities, and needs. And what I started to see universally was this idea that toddlers were often misunderstood. I would, spend a lot of time with these little ones. Their parents would come home. I would see through behavior what this child was trying to communicate. For example, mom comes home from work, toddler's in the bathtub, toddler has a meltdown, mom's questioning why she even came home from work. It's already been a long, tough day. Now she's got like a screaming toddler. Why did the toddler just save this for her?
Right, of course.
And so I just really started to realize how this profound misunderstanding in judging behavior as good or bad instead of understanding it as communication and truly understanding what it's trying to communicate was really blocking a lot of the parent-child relationship and really preventing parents from being able to nurture their children's physical and emotional development because it was just perpetuating this idea that toddlers are terrible. And when we spend a lot of time looking at them as terrible, then we're not in a frame of mind of saying, what support does my child need to be successful here? What skills does my child need to learn to be successful here? We're just focusing on behavior management, which isn't truly supporting their development.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's one of the most critical mindset shifts for parents is that we kind of assume, and I don't know why we do this, but we assume that our children are mini adults. And they're truly not. They don't have the brain chemistry and the brain structure or any of that we have as full functioning adults, right? And it takes a while to actually kind of switch the filters or change out the lens in which we view our children through, because it is so easy to just see behaviors as bad, defiant, aggressive, and be so hyper-focused on the behavior versus what the behavior is trying to communicate.
Yes. And so I see this happen a lot. And it's so interesting that we say we see them as mini adults because in some ways we do, but in other ways we don't. And so what I always say is we tend to underestimate a toddler's physical capabilities and physical skills. And then we overestimate their social emotional skills. So when it comes to physical skills, like maybe clearing their table, clearing their seat after eating, or making their bed or putting on their shoes, we're actually not treating kids like adults. We're doing so much for them because it's faster, quicker, easier if we just do it versus letting them work through that and kind of building up and scaffolding those skills. But then on the other hand, when it comes to social emotional things, we treat them like adults and expect them to have all this impulse control and logical thinking, and they absolutely don't. And I think it's just wild how how our mind plays tricks on us in these ways whenever we're looking at a toddler and trying to evaluate what they're capable of.
Yeah, yeah. You talk about the tantrum myth. And can you break down for the listeners what the tantrum myth is and then like maybe like a mental reframe that they can kind of take away after that?
Yeah, when it comes to tantrums, toddlers, we really say a lot of things like, okay, they're being so bad, they're being manipulative, and we really just will do about anything to make these tantrums stop. We just want them to end right now. But really, the truth of it is that tantrums are a healthy, typical part of development. It is part of how your child develops their emotional regulation skills and what also leads to emotional resilience. And at the same time, when we have tantrums, your child is not being manipulative, they're being strategic. Now, parents are like, okay, yeah, well, I'm pretty sure my child was trying to manipulate me into giving them another cookie because when I said no, they started screaming and crying and throwing themselves on the floor. And then as soon as I said, fine, have another cookie, they acted like it never happened. So what I want to say is, again, this is your child being strategic because imagine what it's like being a young child. You can't just get in the car and drive to the grocery store and buy food. You can't cook your food. You can't even really like take a bath on your own, like do all the things that it takes, right? And then the emotional stuff that they're relying on us to help them regulate their emotions. And so toddlers are accustomed to trying to do whatever it takes, whatever words, whatever behaviors, whatever actions it takes to get their needs and desires met because they're so reliant on us.
Yep.
And that is strategic. And as soon as we shift out of my child is giving me a hard time to my child is having a hard time, it's going to completely change how we respond to these behaviors.
Totally. And if you think about it, we have a catalog of decades of information, right? We have a catalog of, we're able to kind of filter out, oh, that strategy worked for this, or this is how you're appropriate in this situation. This is how you act around grandparents. This is how you act, at a restaurant. We have decades of experience in all of those situations. So we just kind of automatically know what to do. Our children have like 1, 2, maybe 3 years of experience and anything. And like you're saying, like at this time, all of it is absorbing, right? They're absorbing systems, they're absorbing behaviors. They're kind of just getting like these visual cues of what happens and stuff like that. Say you caved one time, gave them the cookie when they did have the meltdown, they log that in the win column, right? And that logs as a strategy that works, right? And so exactly what you're saying, it's not that they're trying to be these horrible kids that are just whining and begging. It worked maybe once, maybe twice. And so they're like, well, it worked. So that's what I know to be true. And they have 3 years of data, 4 years of data. Yeah.
Yeah. And coming from this like specific mindset, because we also have to realize that their brains are very immature. And the other thing that when we're looking at these young kids is that with this lack of life experience, with these immature brains, they just don't have a lot of control over their lives either, right? They don't have a big say, but as a child who's trying to become their own person, they want more than anything to have that control. So that moment whenever you say no to the cookie, we have literally just, taken away our child's autonomy, our child's chance of having a sense of control. And that's frustrating and upsetting. So a lot of the tears that we see that we're trying to stop the tears or fix the problem, I'm using air quotes here, is really just our kids needing to unload their feelings, emotions, frustrations, and come to terms with the reality and to accept what is. And they are entitled to be able to go through all their feels about that.
Yeah. I talk to parents all the time about age appropriate responses, right? It's very challenging. Again, we're going back to like thinking that they should understand, they should know how to do this. They should. How do you guide parents with age appropriate responses to these kind of meltdowns?
Yeah. Well, the biggest thing is that people ask me all the time, okay, So Devin, how do I know what's a realistic expectation? What can I expect for my kid? Like what would be realistic? Okay. So our child's behavior is going to show us what's realistic. There isn't like a magic formula here. And I think parents think that there's like some magic thing or some piece of knowledge they need to know what's realistic for their child. But really, your child's behavior is going to tell you. Because in the end, for a child to learn, for a child to increase their skills, to build these skills, it happens from us meeting them where they're at
Yeah.
and building from there. So I like to think of this. I have this visual in my head. I've always like used this since I started this work back in 2018, where I think of like a little stream and a little bridge, cute little bridge over the stream, and your toddler's on one side and you're on the other side. So if you're on the other side of that bridge and you're saying, come here, you need to come here now. Come here. You're like yelling from across the bridge. Your toddler is probably going to just look at you, do anything else, play in the grass, whatever. They don't care. But if you walk over the bridge, kneel down beside your child, take their hand and say, hey, let's do this together. You're meeting them where they're at. You're more likely to be able to walk them over to the bridge to where you want them to be versus demanding that they come to the place that you want them to be. And so that goes for tantrums as well. If your child is upset and in the middle of all these big emotions, if you're standing on the other side of that bridge and saying, you need to calm down, you need to come over here, all the things, like they can't hear you.
Yep.
If you go across the bridge, you extend your hand, you kneel down beside them, you hold that space for their emotions. They're going to feel seen and heard, and more likely they're going to feel more connected to you, and that connection creates influence, and the influence creates cooperation, and you're more likely to walk over that bridge together because they feel seen and heard.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I would say to some parents too, this is a process. It's not the first time you walk across that bridge. They're going to go, oh, thank you so much for walking across that bridge. That's exactly what I needed, right? If that hasn't been the dynamic, then the child is going to be like, what is this? Like, they're going to be a little, this isn't our normal way of doing things, again, because they only have a couple years of logged data and information of like, this is how we do things. This is the pattern. I know the call and response as to what's normally going to happen. And even if that call and response is negative, it's still the pattern and behavior that they understand is the dynamic. So if you've been in that dynamic for a really long time and you're like, oh, that just is not going to work for my kids. Like, when I get down on their level, it just makes them more frustrated, more mad. It just seems to, it just doesn't work. What do you say to parents that are like, it just doesn't work? Whenever I try a gentle strategy, it's just not effective.
Yes. So the first thing is that when it comes to a tantrum, especially, so I'm just going to keep going with tantrums specifically. So
we're all used to them.
Right. Because I feel like this is a big challenge. And also it's going to change like with different behaviors. But if we're talking about a tantrum, the less is more. The more you are trying to interact with your child and up in their, all the things happening, the more they're probably going to freak out and push back because they are just really overwhelmed in that moment, and they're in their stress response. They're not thinking clearly, and they're not going to be able to connect with you.
Yeah.
So less is more. You might be in like close proximity, but not saying a lot. Or maybe you're nearby, but not too close. It's really about holding the space. Holding the space doesn't necessarily mean you're saying something or doing something. It's more of a way of being.
Mm-hmm.
Grounding yourself, staying open than a thing that you're doing per se. So you might be overdoing it and it's getting a big reaction. Second is that a lot of kids are really highly sensitive. And when we are, talking too much about feelings and emotions, it can bring up a lot of feelings of shame and embarrassment, which can cause kids to lash out as well. So it's also important to get to know your unique child and their personality and temperament, because we don't want to just take a parenting strategy that you hear and blindly apply it to your child. You've got to get to know your child's level of development, their temperament, their personality, and adjust for that if you really want to see success in those moments. Also, when it comes to gentle parenting, the biggest thing that I have to say, we've got to talk about it, is that gentle parenting does not mean gentle on limits. oftentimes people feel that quote unquote gentle strategies don't work because they're only in the emotional, the side, they're only in the connection piece of it. They're forgetting the rest of what I call the recipe for healthy, effective discipline. So the way I've identified this is creating connection, setting limits and following through, and teaching skills. When we don't set limits and follow through on a consistent basis, consistent meaning more often than not, it's predictable. We're going to respond in a certain way. We're not perfect, just predictable.
Yeah.
Right? There's two different things here. But that quote unquote gentle parenting's not going to work because we can't just, we can't use connection as our only tool and expect that to do. It's like if you left, like the flour out of your cake or the eggs out of your cake, your cake's going to turn out a little funny, right? It's like you've got to have all the ingredients you have to in the recipe to get to the outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the gentle parenting strategy it was a failed experiment in terms of like the branding. It's a bad branding situation for that gentle parenting, because in essence the crux of it all is connection. It's based in attachment science. It's based in nonviolent communication, right? These are all solid human principles that it's like heart to heart figuring something out. We're on a team. We're not against each other. That's ultimately what it really is like, how can we work together to solve this problem? How can we like treat each other with mutual respect and kindness during this process? It's really like at the heart of the matter. It's being kind, right? It's not using our parental authority and bigness and power to force a direction that we want it to go, even though that might feel like every part of your body is screaming out saying like, oh my gosh, this isn't working. At the heart of it is we're just trying to teach and model kind ways of solving problems and kind ways of speaking to each other, kind ways of handling situations that aren't going well. It's a branding issue, I will say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everyone's like, gentle parenting's for gentle kids. It's like, no, it's kind of for everyone.
It's for everyone. It's just if we only focus on the connection piece, which don't get me wrong, I have so many client stories from my one-on-one coaching practice where connection has absolutely, like in a sticky situation, the parent just used connection and the behavior in the moment dissolved. However, the majority of the time, we're going to need to set limits and follow through and teach skills while still being gentle with the feelings, emotions, needs, and desires. So again, it's like if we have to have all the ingredients. We have to have all the ingredients.
All of it.
Can I be super real with you and tell you a personal story? A few years back, my son, the whole reason why I do the job I do today, was having one of those fiery moments. He was talking back, demanding it be his way. He was refusing to listen to any of our solutions, and the moment was getting really intense. My husband looked at me and said, well, you know all the parenting stuff, fix this. I completely froze. All the scripts from the books I'd read, all the strategies from the podcasts I'd listened to completely disappeared from my brain in that moment. But based on the volume of challenges that we were having with our strong-willed ADHD son, I knew I had to figure out a different way, because panicking in the moment and grasping at anything only to not follow through at all and end up yelling just wasn't working. From this experience, I developed a repeatable, easy to remember and easy to follow system that literally works with every single triggering moment. I can attest to it because there are many in my life. Now I can show up the way I want. I can communicate in a way that actually resonates with my strong-willed child. If this sounds like a solution for what's happening in your home, take these next 2 steps. Number 1, watch the free training about my rewiring process in the show notes. And then number 2, book your free call. On that call, we will talk about what's happening in your home, and you will get a customized solution that works best for you. I assure you, this doesn't have to feel as hard day in and day out as it does. There is the solution, and I'm so excited to talk to you about it.
You talked about how, these feelings and these experiences when handled in a certain way, can start to really build upon shame and start to really create that as one of the identifiers for children. And then you also mentioned that, it's with the limits, we're also ultimately trying to build skills. Can you talk to, this is the discipline reset that you have in your system, yes?
Hmm.
You talk to about kind of how we're shifting our shifting our mind as opposed to, because I know so many parents at the end of this, they're just like, I ended up doling out a threat and I didn't want to dole out a threat. That wasn't ever my intention. I came into it with the desire to connect, the desire to do all this stuff, but the frequency, the volume, the intensity of it was too much and I ended up giving a threat. Can you walk a parent through your discipline reset and how teaching skills is ultimately the end goal?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that what we have to do is so I talk about this a lot in my book, right? And I break down, first of all, we talk about discipline and what it is and isn't, but then I break down each of the ingredients of the recipe in a chapter for each one to like really go deep into like understanding, okay, how do you implement all of these ingredients? But we really have to start at this place where we're understanding what is our end goal.
Mm.
Is our end goal to have a child that grows into a young adult and an adult that is used to, that can make mistakes, that has had practice making decisions, falling down within a controlled environment, and then figuring out, how to move forward? Have they been given the opportunity to have their voice heard, or are they used to shoving their feelings, emotions, and their voice down
Yeah.
and just people pleasing people in power? Do they feel like they have a voice? Because are they always looking outside of them for someone to draw the line in the sand, or do they know where that line is on their own? Because this is the difference between conventional parenting, where we're using blame, shame, guilt, judgment, and fear, and in an effort to control the child, that to have obedience first, your obedience above all else, or are we working from this place that I like to call the confident leader and guide, where we're using developmentally smart parenting tools like creating connections, setting limits, and following through, and teaching skills, where the child gets to, make a decision, see it didn't work out, and try again without
Mhm.
being punished for being human, right? And so it comes down to, are we going to sit there and like punish our kids for a lack of skills, or are we going to teach them the skills they need to be successful? And that's really what it comes down to when we think about discipline. Because if we're just focused on obedience, then how are we setting our kids up for a success down the road?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really good mental shift is like sometimes in the moment, it's like this moment just needs to end. Like I just need to get through the day, but really having, and that will happen, obviously. There will be times when we're just like, this can't happen.
Absolutely.
But the North Star, right, of all of the choices is like, what kind of adult do I want to see in the world when my influence is no longer the dominant influence, right? Like when the friends are now the main influence, or when social media is now the main influence, or any of the other things that aren't what we are able to control and scaffold and kind of have the parental controls on, right?
Even the
Same.
teacher at school, or the coach or whoever, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. This is like we just started implementing this uh over the last few weeks. My son, we teach a lot in values, right? We teach a lot in like why we behave a certain way is based in a family value, right? And for some, it seems to click in saying like the reason we are doing this is because it's rooted in safety, or it's rooted in kindness, or it's rooted in cooperation, or something along those lines. They seem to get that a little bit more of an understanding, because that's obviously how we operate in the classroom. So it like makes sense, right? We're talking to somebody kindly because we value kindness. You know what I mean? We talk in a certain tone. So my son, he's ADHD. He also has some behavioral challenges that we're working through, but it's not clicking in a way that you would think with like the amount of times we've been able to practice this. And so he and I created a deck of cards. We had just come back from the Magic Castle. They were obsessed with like all the cards. So we created a deck of cards for when he's struggling in the moment, right, with doing something, or he said something nasty, or he's done something unsafe or whatever. He has to go to the deck of cards, pull the value that says safety or kindness or cooperation, and do what's on the back. And so he's really into it. Like, he's like, "Oh, I messed up." And he'll go over to the deck of cards. And for listening, I'm trying not to just be like, do what somebody said, and like on the back, it says like, put your hands on your heart, see if you can listen to your heartbeat. So like trying to teach them how to like listen to their own like internal cues that are being sent to them. One of them is like for cooperation, it's like see something that somebody hasn't put it away and put it away for them, things like that. So I'm calling them positive consequences because it's like you did something. The lesson that we're trying to intrinsically have that be a motivator naturally isn't happening. Go over and practice a new one. And he's like, really, it's great because both the kids are like, gotta get a card. Oh, I gotta go get a card. And it's one of those ways to continue to teach the ideal North Star outcome while not punishing or yelling or adding shame to the experience.
Yes. And I love this example because it illustrates a couple of things. First, we're using play, right? It's not the same play that we might use with like a 3-year-old, but we're using play as connection, right? Because they're on cards, right? And there's something they get to go do. There's like a surprise, an element of surprise to it. So you're utilizing that core principle of like the language of kids is play. Yep. The second thing that I really love about this and here is that you've created buy-in. This is the difference between the my way or the highway, obedience, no matter what. You have to do this because I said no questions asked. Mm-hmm. I'm the parent, you listen, versus incorporating your child into the problem solving because you created buy-in in this, deck of cards and like getting it together and all of these things. Your kids have buy-in in this process. It's not you telling them they have to do something. You've created the buy-in and now there's intrinsic motivation. We have to work with kids' intrinsic motivation, which is what we have available when we're using this, this developmentally smart parenting versus obedience first parenting. There's no room for the child's voice, the child's intrinsic motivation, the child's feelings, emotions, needs, and wants. So I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Anytime, especially like if you have any neurospicy of any kind, it is like if you can gamify any of it, gamifying learning, it's like that's the chef's kiss, right? It also, for me as a parent, it's like I don't always want to be the one who's like, this is what you have to do, right? This is the next step. So it's like I could point to the cards, be like, oh, what's the card say? You know what I mean? And it's light and it's fun. And they take like 3 seconds. There's nothing in it is like a laborious task. It's like give a high five to somebody, give a compliment. It's like these things, but it's these micro movements that are in the positive that teach how to, engage in the situation differently.
Yeah, I love that. There's also this great company called Ebu Toys, and they have these really fun conversation cards and things. And
I like that.
They're all like about social emotional learning, and they're super fun too.
I love that. I love that. Well, I know you have to go. We're wrapping up on time. Can you give me one final give the listeners one final and maybe the most important mental reframe you can think of in this moment for parents of toddlers who are in the trenches, in the thick of it, and just feel like, when is this phase going to be over?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is perfect. This is perfect for this because if you're saying, when is this phase going to be over? It means that your brain is focused on all of the fires, all of the negative, all of the behaviors that you really don't want your child having and you don't want to see. So if your brain is focused on that, it's very unlikely you can see the behaviors you want to see. But my guess is there are moments throughout the day your child's having the behavior you want to see. There's those little pockets, those little moments, but in that time, your brain can't see them because they're so oriented towards what's not going well versus what's going right. So my word of advice or my challenge, my invitation to you is to look for what's going right. Look for the behavior you want to see. Practice it, finding one a day. Write it down. Then practice twice a day, 3 times a day. Get up to 5 times a day, 6 times a day. maybe even every hour, whatever you need to do to start reorienting your brain to seeing the behavior that you want to see. Because then you're going to stop dreading toddlerhood or whatever developmental stage your child is in.
Yep.
You're going to start noticing that there's good in your child. And then when you acknowledge that out loud, you're training your brain to see it. And your child is going to notice that positive acknowledgement, that positive reinforcement, and they're going to be more likely to have that behavior next time. So you are not only training your brain, you're also making parenting easier. And and your child is going to notice and start shifting with you.
Oh, that is so true. That is so true. That confirmation bias for sure. Whatever we're seeking out, we will find, whether
Yes.
it's true or not, because our body is just it's gonna be like, see, the manufactured moment right there. Yep, absolutely. Well, Devon, where can people find you?
Yes. Well, you can find me at transformingtoddlerhood.com. You can find me on Instagram at transformingtoddlerhood, which is a great place to continue the conversation. And you can also find my book, which is the first comprehensive science-based quick reference guide for kids ages 1 to 5. It's kind of like the what to expect for 1 to 5 because it's 45 short chapters. So you flip to whatever chapter that describes the challenge you're having, whether it's teeth brushing or it's setting limits or it's separation anxiety or parental preference or crying or yelling in demands. You flip to that chapter and within 10 minutes, you get the answers you need to your question. You don't have to read an entire book to glean an answer because right now I can't read more than like 3 pages. Basically, I wrote the book that like I need for myself that, set up in a way that I can consume. And so it's there to make parents' lives easier, which you can find on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or transformingtoddlerhood.com/book to see all the retailers.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. Parents are going to love this episode, so I really appreciate it. And everybody, we will see you next week. Thank you for listening to the ResponseABLE Parenting podcast. If you like what you heard, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. If you know someone who would benefit from this podcast, I'd be honored if you'd share this episode with them. Until next time, know that you are enough, you are capable, you've made it through all of your hardest days, and we will keep growing on this parenting journey together. This podcast was produced by Kim Kelty and myself, Becky Jennings, and edited by the Kelty Method, Branding and Podcasting.